Thank you very much, Tanya, and mock trial team. Welcome everybody who is either participating and or in the audience to watch what will be an exciting event. Congratulations to the team that's put it together, led by Tanya and her crew. I believe that this is a trial that is created by that team, so that can't have been easy and will be particularly interesting for you, those of you involved in it. Special thanks to Mr. Vivek and his support of the previous mock trial and of the preparation for this one. Special appreciation to Ms. Nia and Mr. Prasad, who have continued to support these events virtually. And I think that those of you who are participating in it will derive plenty of positive learning experiences out of it. It's fantastic to see those of you who dressed up in shirts and ties, getting rid of your Wild West costumes that you were probably or possibly wearing today, and changing and preparing for the courtroom. I wish you all well, good luck, and may you enjoy it. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nicholson. And I think we have Mr. Vivek in the room with us. So could I ask you, Mr. Vivek, to also mention a couple things about the progress of the trial and our participants so far?
Sure, thank you. I've been, tracking this, I guess, for a couple of months now, and have been really impressed with the questions that the teams have come up with and the organization that you and the other managers have, put into this. I hope that, today isn't just fun, but also educational. And I know that sounds very cliche, but it's been very impressive to see how people are trying to keep this as real to a trial as possible. Everything from the facts, the sequence of events, right down to your deadlines. I have to tell you, deadlines are really important in law, and it comes down to the minute. And you'll find that courts often will give a specific deadline of 5 p.m. on a Friday, and 5:03 is too late. So I've been really impressed with the way that people in this group have been trying their best, given all of their other competing commitments and priorities, to stick to it. It'll serve you well as you go through. Asking teachers, I think, for an extension is relatively easier in your 10th, 11th, and 12th. Gets steadily harder in college and becomes almost impossible by law school. And if you're asking a judge for an extension, you better have a really DAM and good reason to do so. So good job on all of that. And really just the depth to which you all are taking it. I haven't yet heard any of the witnesses or seen questions from witnesses, but I'm really excited after our last trial to see how real life and bringing these characters to life the participants are able to do here. Jury members who I think are on, please pay close attention. This is going to ultimately fall on you guys in the last 15 minutes today to really decide which side won. And while on the one hand, I can say that perhaps some of the deliberations that you see in TV and movies is somewhat accurate in that people can be swayed, people can be biased, people can be, I would say, sometimes misled in a way by theatrics and by polish versus the actual facts in a case. We hope today that we have two excellent teams, and as jurists, you're able to take a look at which side has presented better and forgive any technical issues or stage fright that might occur, and really weigh this case on the facts that are presented. So Tanya and the rest of the team, thank you so much. Both of the counselors and counselor teams, good luck. And juries, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek, and thank you for your guidance throughout all of this. I really think that all of us needed it, and we're really glad we had you throughout. So without further ado, I'd like to hand the court over to Akshan, our presiding judge.
Thank you. All right, so there are a couple things I'd like to clarify, specifically about the timesheet. The time between opening and closing, that's transferable. So if you take a couple seconds extra in your opening statement, then that transfers to your closing, if that makes any sense. So now, without further ado, I have a couple more things to get through. So I would like all witnesses to turn on their videos so I can swear them in. All right, so I would like all the witnesses to repeat after me. I, name, do solemnly and sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give to the court in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I will put this in the chat box just to make sure that you are aware of what to say.
I, the lead detective, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give to the court in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
If all the other witnesses could do this at the same time, it would really speed things up. So,
I, Jullian Gallego, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give to the court in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I, Betty Fulford, do solemnly and sincerely. I, Betty Fulford, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give to the court in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
are those all the witnesses? If so, then I will proceed to the jurors. The jury, I would like you to all repeat after what I put in the chat box as a verbal affirmation of your oath to the court. Do each of you solemnly swear that you will well and truly try to make a true deliverance between the United States and the defendant at the bar, and a true verdict rendered according to the evidence, so help you God? Jury?
He needs a vocal affirmation.
Yes.
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 All right then. So to kick this off, I will now, good evening, or I should say good afternoon. And so I'm going to be calling the case of today's criminal court trial. Now, are both parties ready? The plaintiff and defendant?
The plaintiff is ready.
The defendant is ready.
All right, so now I'd like to take a couple minutes just if anybody has any pretrial notions to clarify.
The plaintiffs do not have any.
The defendant doesn't have any either.
All right then. So trial shall begin now, and I shall now allow for the plaintiff to make their opening statement.
Under U.S. Code 18-1111, murder is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. Malice aforethought can fall into one of two categories: express malice and implied malice, but the only one relevant here today is the latter. Express malice murders are those in which a person intended to cause death or grievous bodily harm to another. The definition of murder continues to state that murders of the first degree include those perpetrated by poison, those committed in the perpetration or the attempt to perpetrate burglary or robbery. I don't have to look at the jury to know that everyone is puzzled as to why I'm recanting these long, boring definitions from law school. I bring these forth today because today we tried Jullian Gallego, a man us, the plaintiff, and the California Police Department strongly believed to be responsible for the untimely and gruesome death of Viktor Mendelssohn, a loving father and respected member of his community, be it in the diamond cutting industry or a San Francisco locality. Jullian Gallego is the only person who's recorded having been at and then having been caught exiting Viktor Mendelssohn's residence in the window of his murder. Jullian Gallego is the only person who's been found to have bought a form of belladonna, have any access to belladonna, the hallucinogenic, poisonous product with which Jullian Gallego was dosed in concentrated, endangering quantity, a dosage which Jullian Gallego administered knowing full well Viktor Mendelssohn had access to the diamond saw which resulted in his heavily influenced first-degree murder, a murder motivated by Jullian Gallego's greed to steal a diamond, the Blue Orchid, worth potentially millions, a diamond with which Jullian Gallego was caught red-handed in his personal workstation amongst his personal belongings. I want the jury, the judge, everyone here present today to remember these definitions of first-degree murder, to remember the definition of express malice, one which Jullian Gallego fit perfectly on the early hours of the 9th of December 2020 with his premeditated poisoning, burglary, and perfectly planned and executed first-degree murder of Viktor Mendelssohn. I hope all of us here can acknowledge Jullian Gallego's heinous crimes, recognize their severity, and take appropriate action to account for said crimes, to find true justice for Viktor Mendelssohn and his daughter, Melania Mendelssohn, present with us here today in this very courtroom, seeking justice for her father's untimely demise caused by Jullian Gallego. Thank you.
May the defendant proceed with their opening statement.
Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury, this is a case where an innocent man is being wrongfully tried for the murder of his idol, his mentor, and his teacher. That man is my client, Jullian Gallego, who was the assistant of Mr. Mendelsohn and worked for him for almost 4 years. I am Sahil Vora, the first chair for the defense, and I am accompanied by my second chair, Ujas Sharma, my associate, Anvita Kolipara, and my client, Jullian Gallego. Throughout this trial, the prosecution will try to introduce evidence in an attempt to make my client look at fault. However, do not make the mistake of believing them. Mr. Gallego is a young man that worked for Mr. Mendelsohn for almost half a decade and considered him an idol and a mentor. Mr. Gallego fell in love with the art of cutting and working with diamonds because of the expert guidance that Mr. Mendelsohn provided, and now is being wrongfully tried for this case, all because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let me explain what I mean. Mr. Mendelsohn was murdered early in the morning of the 9th of December in his house with an electric rotary saw. Mr. Gallego had come to Mr. Mendelsohn's house on the night before the murder to talk to Mr. Mendelsohn about a design that inspired him to change the cut of the diamond that they were working on, the blue orchid. Mr. Mendelsohn did not agree with my client, which led to a creative argument between them and resulted in Mr. Gallego leaving the house in disappointment. Disagreements such as these were common between them, as they were both passionate artists, and Mr. Gallego understood that because he owed his love for art to Mr. Mendelsohn. Because of unfortunate coincidences such as this, the prosecution will try to make you believe that my client, an innocent man who revered Mr. Mendelsohn, should be tried for this case, even though there is another person who should be considered a key suspect. Betty Fulford was Mr. Mendelsohn's neighbor and was the person who supposedly discovered his body on the morning of the 9th of December. Miss Fulford was not only the person to discover his body, but she was also awake at the time of the murder. Along with this, she entered Mr. Mendelsohn's house at around 6:20 in the morning without being invited or welcomed in, and claimed it was because she saw that his teapot had not been changed from the night before. Now, when detectives arrived at Mr. Mendelsohn's house around 7:30 that same day, they didn't find any teapot in the entire house. In addition to this, Miss Fulford claimed to have called Mr. Mendelsohn the day before she discovered his body. However, I will present evidence to you that shows you that there's no record of any call from Miss Fulford to Mr. Mendelsohn on the day of the murder. Furthermore, Mr. Mendelsohn was drugged with belladonna leaves in his tea, and Miss Fulford admitted to giving him tea often in the mornings and has a home garden in her yard where belladonna can be easily grown. Honorable members of the jury, the defense is going to call 2 witnesses today. The first one will be my client, Jullian Gallego. Mr. Gallego is going to tell you about his relationship with Mr. Mendelsohn, a relationship centered around passion and trust. My client will also address the allegations and unfortunate circumstances that resulted in the unjust arrest of him and tell the jury the truth in each of those situations. The second witness that the defense is going to call will be Betty Fulford, the person who we believe is the actual perpetrator of this crime. Through a series of questions and facts that would be asked to Ms. Fulford, such as the ones I just mentioned earlier, every single one of you in the jury will realize that Ms. Fulford is the person who should be tried for this crime, not my client. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask that you please keep an open mind about this case until you hear all of the evidence. I also ask that you return a verdict of not guilty for the defendant, Jullian Gallego. Thank you for your time and attention.
And now I would like to start with the direct examinations of the prosecution. Now there is an additional note that I would like to add on, and that is that the prosecution, due to untimeliness, will have 30 seconds reduced from all of their direct and their cross-examinations, meaning that they will have 9.5 minutes for their direct 1, direct 2, and direct 3, and they will have 7.5 minutes for their cross 1, cross 2, and cross 3. Just to reiterate, you may begin prosecution.
The prosecution would like to call the lead detective as the witness for the direct examination.
Yes.
Do you believe that you are qualified to investigate this case?
Yes, I believe I'm qualified to investigate this case.
As you stated, you're a qualified and capable detective. Has your acumen helped you decide who your primary suspect is?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Could you rephrase the question?
As you stated, you are a qualified and capable detective. So has your acumen helped you decide who you think the primary suspect is?
Objection, leading question.
Okay.
Objection has been accepted.
Has your acumen helped you decide who your primary suspect is?
Objection, ask question.
The question was objected to. The
objection has been rejected.
lead detective?
Right. So yes, it has helped me in this case.
Jullian Gallego was found on CCTV footage leaving Viktor Mendelssohn's house at 1 a.m. on the 9th of December 2020. Is that correct?
The window was between 12:45 and 1 a.m., I believe.
Witness, that was not my question. Was Jullian Gallego found on CCTV footage leaving Viktor Mendelssohn's residence at 1 a.m. on the 9th of December 2020?
Objection, Your Honor. He's leading the witness.
Objecting has been overruled.
Yes, Jullian Gallego was found leaving the crime scene.
And the suspected window of Viktor Mendelssohn's murder ranges from 12:30 a.m. to 4 a.m. on the 9th of December 2020. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there was no report or evidence that Betty Fulford was present at Viktor Mendelssohn's residence any time of this window that you had mentioned. Is that also correct?
Yes.
And is there any evidence whatsoever that anyone but Jullian Gallego or Viktor Mendelssohn were present at Viktor Mendelssohn's residence anytime between 12:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the 9th of December 2020?
No.
There was a teacup found on the premises from which Viktor Mendelssohn had drank prior to his death. Is that correct?
Yes.
And a report was generated on this teacup via the pharmacology expert Rodney G. Richmond. Yes?
Yes.
And this report states that the concentration of belladonna in the teacup consumed would have caused Viktor Mendelssohn to have hallucinations. Yes?
Yes.
And do you, with your established credibility as a detective, believe that one is in such a mental state that they have hallucinations, they can act rationally?
No, I do not believe they can act rationally in that state.
I want to clarify, rashly. Do you believe that when someone is in a state of mind where they are having hallucinations, they can act rashly?
Yes.
Detective, are you aware that using NIST fingerprint aging technology, we determined that Jullian Gallego had contact with Viktor Mendelssohn's electric rotary saw 12 hours prior to Viktor Mendelssohn's murder?
Yes.
And detective, in your deposition, you had mentioned that you suspect there were more diamonds to be recovered from Viktor Mendelssohn's pouch than were found in actuality?
Yes.
So detective, qualified as you are, can you affirm your prior stated belief that Jullian Gallego is the prime suspect in the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn?
Yes, I can affirm that Jullian Gallego is the prime suspect in the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn.
Thank you. That'll be all.
May the defendant proceed with their cross-examination?
Yes. Please state your full name for the record.
I am the lead detective.
Mr. Detective, where was the blue orchid found?
In a hidden, in a false drawer underneath Jullian Gallego's workstation.
And were you the person that actually found the diamond?
I did not personally uncover the diamond, no.
Mr. Detective, you claimed that Mr. Gallego was behaving uneasy when his workstation was being searched. Is that correct?
Yes, I did claim that.
Since you were not near Mr. Gallego, what made you believe that he was uneasy?
So it was a quote given to me by my other detectives that he said.
So your only basis for making this statement was from a one-line quote from Mr. Gallego?
Objection,
Well,
relevance
in
of
general,
question.
Objection sustained.
The relevance for this question is it states to his judgment and his qualifications as a detective and speaks to the nature for which he made this assumption.
Objection. Facts not found in evidence. It was reported that there was indeed a quote by Jullian Gallego that he... I'm sorry, let me pull up the exact quote.
Okay, we'll continue from this line of questioning. Mr. Detective, when you were taking Mr. Gallego's statement, is it true that he called Viktor Mendelssohn his idol and his teacher?
yes, he did indeed say that.
And Mr. Detective, are you aware that Mr. Gallego had no debts and all his expenses and education was paid for?
Yes.
Then what motives do you believe that Mr. Gallego had for committing this crime?
Objection. Call for speculation.
As
One,
Objection
I may
has
have
been sustained.
Mr. Detective, did you question Mr. Mendelssohn's neighbor, Betty Fulford?
Yes, I did.
And after your investigation, did you consider her a likely or prime suspect for this case, for this crime?
After Jullian Gallego, yes.
Mr. Detective, let me clarify my question. After your investigation and throughout this case, did you consider Betty Fulford a likely
Objection
suspect
asked and answered. He said that Betty Fulford was considered. He said after. It's very clear.
I would like
that the phrase...
clarification, prosecution.
Objection has been sustained.
I would like clarification, just for the defendant's sake. Did you consider Betty Fulford a prime suspect for this case?
The objection has been sustained. Excuse me. The objection has been sustained.
The defendant is looking for clarification. The objection was asked and answered, right? So you just stated that she was not a prime suspect, as Jullian Gallego was a prime suspect, right? Is this correct?
Yes, that is what I was about to state.
Then, Mr. Detective, are you aware that the reason Miss Fulford entered Mr. Mendelssohn's house on the morning of the murder was because she noticed his teapot hadn't been changed?
I am aware of that, yes.
However, when your detectives arrived in Mr. Mendelssohn's house, just an hour after Miss Fulford called them, did they find any teapot in the house?
I can confirm that they did not.
Mr. Detective, did you not find it suspicious that Miss Fulford claimed that she saw a teapot in Mr. Mendelssohn's kitchen, said she didn't touch or move it, and yet an hour later, your own detectives weren't able to find that very teapot?
I did find it suspicious. However, the overwhelming, the evidence against Jullian Gallego was simply too overwhelming.
Mr. Detective,
which is why I considered him the prime suspect.
That wasn't part of the question. I'll continue. Mr. Detective, when you took Miss Fulford's statement, she stated that she called Mr. Mendelsohn on the morning of the murder. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I have here a copy of Miss Fulford's phone records, and there is no record of any call to Mr. Mendelsohn on the morning of the murder. Are you aware of this?
I am aware of this, yes.
Did you not find this worth looking into?
I did find it worth looking into, but as I said before, the evidence when weighing
that was all that was asked. Mr. Detective, when you questioned Miss Fulford, she stated that she heard of the blue orchid on the news. Is that correct?
She said she heard of a diamond. She didn't mention it was the blue orchid.
However, the Maharaj of Jodhpur, who the diamond belonged to, valued his privacy, which means that no pictures of the diamond were available to the public, and no media outlet had access to this diamond, or even knowledge of it. Knowing this, do you still believe that it's probable that Miss Fulford found out about the diamond through the news?
I believe it could be possible as she had very close contact with Jullian Gallego.
Detective, the question was, do you still believe that she could have found out about the diamond through the news?
No, not through the news.
Mr. Detective, what was the approximate time for the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn?
12:30 a.m. to 4 a.m. on December 9th.
And are you aware that Miss Fulford stated that she was awake past midnight on that same night?
I'm aware of this, yes.
Mr. Detective, after all these facts have just been presented to you, do you still believe that Miss Fulford should not be a key suspect for the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn?
No, I do not believe so.
Mr. Detective, is it true that you worked numerous theft and murder cases in your experience?
Yes.
Then, in a case such as this, would a person who lied to a detective, lied about phone records, lied about knowledge of the stolen item, and conveniently was the first person to discover the victim's body, be considered a likely suspect in this case?
Yes.
Then, Mr. Detective, I ask you once again, do you still believe that Miss Fulford should not be a suspect in the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn?
I believe Miss Betty Fulford is a possible suspect.
Thank you, Mr. Detective. I have no further question for you. This witness is excused.
May the prosecution begin with their second direct examination.
The prosecution has not called any other witnesses.
All right, then we will start with the defendant's direct examinations. May you please call on your first witness?
The defense would like to call Jullian Gallego to the stand.
All right. As you're already sworn in, I will not waste any much time, and we'll just get to it. Please state your full name for the record.
Jullian Gallego.
Mr. Gallego, did you know Mr. Mendelsohn?
Victor was my idol. He was my teacher. We worked together for 4 years, and I was his assistant during the entire time. Victor taught me so much, and he's the reason why I'm so interested in working with diamonds and learning.
Mr. Gallego, you were cutting out.
Your Honor, the witness's Wi-Fi seems to be unstable.
Oh, sorry. I think I'll repeat that. He was my idol.
I request that we wait for further time until the issue calms down. If it may help, may the witness Jullian Gallego turn off their camera and then proceed to speak.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want me to proceed, Mr. Gallego?
The defense may proceed.
Yes, please.
Mr. Gallego, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'll continue with the line of questioning. So, Mr. Gallego, when did you last see Mr. Mendelssohn?
I was at Mr. Mendelssohn's house at around midnight on the night of the murder. I left his house around midnight. I forgot to check the exact time that I left.
And why did you go to his house in the first place?
I went to Victor's house because I saw a design by Henry Winston catalog which changed the cut of the blue orchid. I went there at around and left, but as I said before, I didn't time that I left.
For the clarity of the prosecution, could Jullian Gallego please repeat his last answer? He cut out.
Mr. Gallego, I would request you to repeat your last answer.
Oh, I went to Victor's house to show a design by the Henry Winston catalog, so I could inspire Victor to change. Okay. I went to Mr. Mendelssohn's house because I signed by the Henry Winston catalog, which inspired me to change the cut of blue orchid. I arrived at his house at around 9 p.m. and left soon after midnight.
Is it true that you and Victor had an argument the night of the murder, which was the reason that you left his house in the first place?
Yes, that is true. However, it was a creative argument, and it was about changing the cut of the diamond. Victor and I are both passionate artists, and it's us to argue, agree, and disagree with each other. In fact, it was Victor who was dominating this argument. After all, he is my teacher, or was my teacher.
Mr. Gallego, how were you feeling when you left his house?
I was disappointed because I was very keen on changing the cut of the diamond, as the one I saw in the catalog had caught my eye.
Mr. Gallego, are you aware where the blue orchid was found?
Yeah, the diamond was found in a false drawer at the bottom of my desk.
And are you aware how it got there?
I am not. I have never even knew my desk had a false drawer at the bottom. The desk was there in the workshop when I first started working for it, and it has been there ever since. I've never added or removed any part of the desk or the drawers. Even the detectives around me can confirm that I was surprised when the diamond was found there.
Mr. Gallego, when the detectives were searching your workstation, you stated that there's no need to look there. Those are my private materials, correct?
Yes, that's
Mr. Gallego, could you repeat the last sentence?
Your Honor, the defense requests that the witness has a little more time, as these are unforeseen circumstances and he has no control over them.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can, yes, much better. So I will repeat the question. Mr. Gallego, when the detectives were searching your workstation, you stated that there's no need to look there. Those are my private materials. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. And why did you make the statement?
I made that statement because I thought it was unnecessary for detectives to look through my stuff, since I had no knowledge of any false drawer in my desk. I didn't think that anything would be hidden there, let alone anything to hide the diamond.
The detectives also mentioned that you acted uneasy around them. Do you believe this to be true?
According to the lead detective, the main reason for making this assumption was that I told them that it was not necessary to look through my personal stuff, and I had already explained why I had made that comment. I also heard a previous detective saying that I was being fidgety, but that has nothing to do with me being nervous or uneasy. I have always been a fidgety person, and I have never liked to sit or stand still. I'm always either tapping my leg or playing with my hands. You can ask anyone that knows me well, and they'll tell you the same.
Mr. Gallego, is it true that your fingerprints were found on the murder weapon?
Yes.
And how do you plan to explain this to the jury?
Victor and I worked in the same office, and the electric saw that we used is a common tool to cut diamonds. And since we shared a workspace, we both used the same tools. I didn't touch that saw after I worked with it on the afternoon of the 8th of December, and a forensic examination of the saw proved this, as my fingerprints were last dated up to 12 hours before the time of Victor's death.
Mr. Gallego, could you please explain your financial situation for me?
I have no debts, and I have no expenses that I can't pay. I've been able to afford all my education and costs for my apartment. Some of my education is paid for by the family support that my father pays, although him and I are estranged. Though I may not be the wealthiest person, I am definitely financially stable.
All right, Mr. Gallego. Are you aware of a leaf called belladonna?
Yes, it's an herb that can induce serious hallucinations if ingested in high quantities.
Are you aware of its significance in this case?
Yes, I heard that Victor was heavily drugged with belladonna leaves in his teacup.
All right, Mr. Gallego, did you shop anywhere on 2nd of December, 2020?
Yes, I shopped at the Scarlet Sage Herb Company. However, I only bought a few herbs to help with my sleep and a couple of essences and a couple other items that I can't recall. I did not purchase belladonna leaves.
That will be all, Mr. Gallego. Thank you.
May the prosecution proceed with their cross-examination of the witness.
Okay. You were one of the only people who knew where Viktor Mendelssohn kept the diamond, correct?
The diamond being the Blue Orchid, to clarify.
Can you repeat the question?
You were one of the only people who knew where Viktor Mendelssohn kept the Blue Orchid, correct?
One of few.
A detective noted that and reported that when he was looking through your workstation, you were behaving uneasily. Is this correct?
I was fidgety, and
that was not the question. We will move on from this. Before the Blue Orchid was uncovered in a false bottom drawer near your desk, you had said, "There's no need to look there. Those are my private materials." Is this correct?
Yes.
What qualifications do you believe you have to interfere in a criminal investigation?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
Objection sustained.
I believe that it was unnecessary to look through my personal
You don't
stuff.
have to answer that question, witness.
Okay. You did not tell the detective about the argument you had with Victor that night, correct?
Correct.
Only a few days before the death of Viktor Mendelssohn, you shopped at Scarlet Sage Herb Co. That is correct?
Correct.
The Scarlet Sage Herb Co. sells a product called Sister Spinster Flora, one that contains belladonna. Yes.
I am unaware of that.
In your deposition, you had denied that you bought this item. Is that correct?
Objection. This was clarified in an affidavit sent to the court.
Okay.
Objection sustained.
Okay. Jullian Gallego, do you know that there's a record from the Scarlet Sage Herb Co. business records that states that you had bought Sister Spinster Flora, a product that does indeed contain belladonna?
Yes.
Okay. During the time period of the 8th and 9th December, you knew of the existence of the electric handheld rotary saw that ended up being what caused Viktor Mendelssohn's demise, yes?
Yes.
Mr. Gallego, you have your own tools in your personal workstation, yes?
Yes, but most of our tools are shared.
Thank you. CCTV footage found during our discovery shows that you were the only person recorded leaving Viktor Mendelssohn's residence in the window of the murder from 12:30 to 4 a.m. on the 9th of December 2020. Is that correct?
I did leave Mr. Viktor Mendelssohn's house during that time period.
To clarify, you left at 1 a.m. as caught by CCTV cameras. Is this also correct?
I left sometime after midnight, though I'm unaware of the exact time.
Mr. Gallego, has your education so far been afforded by family support paid from your estranged father?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
It speaks to the witness's financial situation, which could speak to his motive to commit felony burglary.
Objection overruled.
Please answer the question.
Yes.
Mr. Gallego, you are no pharmacological expert. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. That'll be all.
May the defendant proceed with their second witness if they possess one.
The defense would like to call Betty Fulford to the stand.
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to treat the witness as hostile.
Permission denied.
According to Rule 611C of the California Evidence Code, an attorney is allowed to call a hostile witness if the witness is adverse or contrary to their client's legal position.
This is a question to the witness.
This is a question to Your Honor. This is the basis for the hostility.
Then hostility is granted.
Please state your full name for the record.
Betty Fulford.
Since you've already been sworn in, we don't need to do that. Is it true that you live next to the house of Viktor Mendelssohn?
Yes.
And on the morning of the 9th of December, 2020, were you the person that discovered Viktor's body in his house?
Yes.
What time did you discover his body?
Around 6:30 in the morning.
On the morning of the murder, did anyone invite you into Mr. Mendelssohn's house?
No.
Then why did you deem it appropriate to enter someone else's house so early in the morning, especially since you weren't welcomed or invited in?
Victor is one of my good friends, and he hadn't changed his pot of tea, and I wanted to see if he wanted anything.
Miss Fulford, what time do you normally get up in the morning?
Around 7.
And as stated in a prior deposition conducted on the 25th of January, 2021, at this time, around 7 a.m., you normally chat with Viktor Mendelssohn over the fence, correct?
Yes.
Miss Fulford, in this same deposition, you stated that you entered his house on that morning because you saw that he wasn't outside and you were used to talking to him around this time. Just like you stated, you were used to talking to him over the fence at this time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then if you normally see Viktor around 7 a.m. in the morning, why were you surprised to not see him when you had woken up nearly an hour before this time, around 6 a.m.?
He is normally awake before me and already out there, and I noticed that he hadn't changed his pot of tea.
Miss Fulford, are you aware that the official time of death for Viktor Mendelssohn was between 12:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. on the 9th of December, 2020?
Yes.
Miss Fulford, what time did you sleep that night?
A little bit after midnight, although I am uncertain of the actual time.
So the time of the murder was between 12:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. and you were awake past midnight that same night, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Miss Fulford, since you and Viktor Mendelssohn were direct neighbors, was there any other way for you to enter Mr. Mendelssohn's house without using the front door?
No.
There was no back door or any other form of entrance to his house?
I don't believe so.
But you and Mr. Mendelssohn did share a fence, is that correct?
Yes.
Miss Fulford, you previously stated that your reason for entering the house of Mr. Mendelsohn on the morning of the murder was because you saw that his teapot hadn't been changed, correct?
Yes.
Where was this teapot?
It was near the window in the kitchen.
Miss Fulford, do you often give Victor tea in the mornings?
Yes, I do.
And are you aware that Mr. Mendelsohn was heavily drugged with belladonna leaves in his tea?
Once the report was released, yes.
Miss Fulford, when you entered Mr. Mendelsohn's house on the morning of the murder, did you touch or move that teapot that you saw?
I did not.
Then, when authorities arrived at Mr. Mendelsohn's house just an hour after you called them and saw the supposed teapot, why did they not find any teapot in his kitchen anywhere or anywhere in his house?
I'm not sure. I saw what I saw.
Did the teapot disappear or vanish into thin air between the time that you saw it?
Objection calls for speculation. How could Betty Fulford know anything about this?
Miss Fulford,
Objection sustained.
do you believe that Mr. Mendelsohn trusted you?
Yes.
And you previously stated that you often gave him tea in the mornings, right?
That is correct.
Since you claim Mr. Mendelsohn trusted you, did he ever question you about what was in the tea?
No.
And are you aware that after a forensic examination conducted that showed the drinker of the tea would not have known that he was consuming belladonna at the time of the ingestion?
Yes.
So, to clarify, you often gave Mr. Mendelsohn tea in the mornings, he didn't question what was in the tea, and he was unaware of the presence of belladonna leaves in his tea, is that correct?
Yes.
Miss Fulford, do you know of atropine and scopolamine, which are drugs that can cause blurred vision, dizziness, and drowsiness?
I am aware of them, yes.
And are you aware that traces of these drugs were found in Mr. Mendelsohn's teacup?
After the reports were released, yes.
Both of these drugs are found in plants that can be grown in a home garden. Miss Fulford, do you have a home garden in your backyard?
Yes, I do.
Miss Fulford, in a conversation you had with a detective, did you state that you called Mr. Mendelsohn on the morning of the murder before you discovered his body?
Yes, I did.
I have here a copy of your phone records. Why is there no log of any outgoing call from you to Mr. Mendelsohn on the day of the murder?
If I didn't use my own phone, then I must have used his landline. I was in shock after the murder.
Let me clarify. Miss Fulford, you stated that you entered his house, stayed in the foyer for a while. Was there a landline in his foyer that you called from?
Yes.
Miss Fulford, I remind you, you are under oath. Are you sure there was a landline in his foyer?
If I remember correctly, but yes.
But you just stated that you're not sure of what happened. How can you testify to that if you weren't sure of it?
Objection, badgering.
Objection sustained.
Miss Fulford, are you aware of Viktor Mendelssohn's profession?
Yes, I am.
And are you aware of a diamond called the Blue Orchid?
Yes.
How were you made aware of this diamond?
Victor would mention it vaguely over our conversations, but I also heard of it through the news.
Explain what you mean by vaguely.
Victor would talk about the commission, and sometimes when I would ask him about his job, he would tell me what he was working on and about his projects.
So he explicitly told you about the Blue Orchid.
Objection asked and answered. The witness mentioned vaguely, not explicitly. This has already been answered.
Objection has been sustained.
Miss Fulford, did Viktor Mendelssohn mention the words Blue Orchid when describing this to you?
No, he mentioned a diamond.
Okay. You previously stated that you found out about this diamond through the news, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that there's been no picture of this diamond or any mention of this gem on the news?
No, I heard of it through the news, and I'm certain of that.
Miss Mendelsohn, if there's been no picture or any mention of this gem on the news, and you claim to only follow the news, how did you know about the diamond, and how did you know its characteristics, such as it was big, blue, and uncut?
I am unsure as to how to answer that question.
Miss Fulford, you testified just now that you didn't know specifics about the diamond. However, when a detective asked you in an interview, you stated that you knew the diamond was big, blue, and uncut. How were you made aware of this?
Objection asked and answered. She'd already mentioned that Viktor Mendelssohn vaguely described his projects. Viktor Mendelssohn could have described a big blue diamond and not used the name Blue Orchid.
Betty Fulford, did Viktor Mendelssohn explicitly use these words? You were under oath.
I do not recall.
Objection has been sustained, to be clear.
So to clarify, you do not know if he mentioned these exact words?
Yes, I do not recall.
Thank you, Your Honor. This witness is excused.
All right, may the defense start their cross-examination of the witness.
Okay. Would you
Oh, wait,
consider
sorry,
yourself?
prosecution.
Would you consider yourself and Viktor Mendelssohn friends?
Yes.
And were you traumatized when you saw his body when you entered his residence?
Yes, he was my best friend.
Do you feel that, considering your traumatization, your memory or your recollection of the events when you found the body might not be 100% accurate?
Absolutely. Yes.
How long have you and Viktor Mendelssohn known each other?
More than 13 years. It's a long time.
And to your knowledge, do you grow belladonna in your garden?
No, I do not.
What about atropine or scopolamine?
No.
Did you ever come in contact with the electric rotary saw of Viktor Mendelssohn?
No.
Thank you, that'll be all.
All right, may the defense call up their last witness for direct examination if they possess one.
The defense does not have another witness, Your Honor.
All right, we shall proceed to the closing statements. First, a closing statement made by the prosecution and then one by the defense. You each have 10 minutes maximum, and since you have not taken extra time for your opening statements, you have the full 10 minutes. May the prosecution begin?
The prosecution will keep this very short and very simple. This court operates on facts, not on sentiments. This court especially should not operate on the sentiments, the feelings, and what is voiced by a prime suspect in the murder of a loving father, Viktor Mendelssohn. The facts of the case are this. CCTV footage shows that only and just only Jullian Gallego was found leaving the premises of Viktor Mendelssohn at any time in the window of murder. The facts also show that the teacup was consumed by Viktor Mendelssohn before or during the window of murder. The defendants today have tried to besmirch the name of an innocent woman, a friend of Viktor Mendelssohn, who has no motive or no reason to harbor any ill will against Viktor Mendelssohn, particularly considering her at best vague knowledge. It is very clear that she was shaken and she was traumatized by the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn. I asked the jury, I asked the honor, I asked everyone here present today to really question, is Betty Fulford a murderer? I want to put this forth. The facts point primarily to Jullian Gallego being responsible for the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn. I hope this jury can do justice to Viktor Mendelssohn and serve justice for his daughter, Melania Mendelssohn, who is present with us here today. Thank you.
Are there any rebuttals to be made by the defense?
No.
May the defense proceed with their closing statement.
Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury, this is a case where an innocent man is being wrongfully tried for the murder of his idol, his mentor, and his teacher. Now that all the evidence has been presented to you, I am sure that each and every one of you will agree with me when I say that my client, Jullian Gallego, is not guilty of this crime, and the real offender of this murder and theft is Betty Fulford. Due to the evidence that has come to light throughout this trial, it is clear that Mr. Gallego is an innocent man who is being wrongfully tried for a crime that he did not commit. My client trusted, cared about, and idolized Mr. Mendelsohn and considered him a teacher and a mentor. He owed his entire career and passion for diamond cutting to Mr. Mendelsohn and was heartbroken when he found out about this detestable crime that had been committed. Now I'm sure that each and every one of you in the jury knows that the burden of proof is on the plaintiff in this case, and we can all agree that the facts that were provided were insubstantial and unconvincing. Their witness, Mr. Detective, presented testimony that showed his inability to notice important facts. The detective also demonstrated that he's unwilling to change his opinion and accept the truth, even when evidence is found contradicting his views. This was seen when evidence of Miss Fulford lying to detectives, lying about phone records, and lying about her knowledge of the stolen item was not even considered by the detective. Only after the defendants pointing out this, the lead detective accepted that she should be considered a prime suspect in this case. The prosecutor's case relied on two main facts. One, that the diamond was found in Mr. Gallego's workstation, and two, that Mr. Gallego and Mr. Mendelsohn had an argument the night before his death. Although my client has already addressed this issue and explained the truth of it, we will go over the events that occurred in both of these situations. Firstly, the blue orchid was found in my client's workstation, hidden in a false drawer bottom in his desk. As Mr. Gallego previously explained, he had absolutely no knowledge of how the blue orchid got there, as he wasn't even aware of the presence of a false drawer bottom in his desk. My client has been at the same desk for all 4 years that he worked for Mr. Mendelsohn, and this desk has been there since even before he worked there. Mr. Gallego has never made any structural changes to the desk, meaning he hasn't added or removed any compartments, which is why it is clear that the diamond was placed in his desk in an attempt to frame him. Now keep in mind that Miss Fulford was awake at the time of the murder and heard the argument that occurred between Mr. Mendelsohn and Mr. Gallego, making it evident that she would believe that my client would be the perfect person to frame for this crime. The plaintiff claims that Mr. Gallego stole and hid the blue orchid. However, the blue orchid was not the only diamond that the thief stole. Where did the rest of the diamonds go? If the prosecution believes that my client stole and hid the blue orchid, they would have had an explanation for where the rest of the diamonds are, but they don't. If my client actually hid the diamond in the false drawer bottom in his desk, he would have also hid the rest of the diamonds there, since he would have believed that it wouldn't be found. And the second piece of evidence that the prosecution presented in an attempt to convict my client was that he had an argument with Mr. Mendelsohn on the night before the murder. What the plaintiff failed to comprehend is that this argument was a creative one, where Mr. Gallego approached Mr. Mendelsohn because he saw a design in a Henry Winston catalog which inspired him to change the cut of the diamond. My client even swore to this in an affidavit that was presented in this trial. These two situations were the main basis for the prosecution's claims, and we have just gone through the reality of these situations. It can now clearly be seen to all of us that even with the plaintiff's attempts to misguide you, the facts don't change and the truth prevails. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, not only is the defense certain that Mr. Gallego is innocent, but we can also show you the person who is actually responsible for this crime. Betty Fulford, the neighbor of Mr. Mendelsohn, who was the person to discover his body and who admitted to being awake at the time of the murder. Miss Fulford is also on record lying to detectives, as she stated that she entered Mr. Mendelsohn's house because she saw that his teapot had not been changed since the day before. However, when officials arrived at his house, just an hour after Miss Fulford called them, there was no sign of any teapot anywhere. In addition to this, Miss Fulford also stated that she called Mr. Mendelsohn on the morning of the murder. However, the defense presented evidence that showed that there was no record of any call from Miss Fulford to Mr. Mendelsohn on the day of the murder. Now, in a prior deposition, when the lead detective was asked whether he had knowledge of Miss Fulford lying about calling Mr. Mendelsohn, he said yes. The detective actually admitted to knowing that Miss Fulford lied about her phone records, yet did nothing about it. Nothing until the defense brought up these facts again, and the detective actually admitted right now, just in this trial, that he believes Betty Fulford should be considered a key suspect. Continuing with the reasons that Miss Fulford should have been tried for this case and is guilty for committing this crime, Mr. Mendelsohn was drugged with belladonna leaves in his tea. Now, this alone may not make sense to you. However, when you take into consideration that Miss Fulford admitted to often giving Mr. Mendelsohn tea in the mornings, things start to make a lot more sense. Not only did Miss Fulford give him tea, but she also has a home garden in her yard, and belladonna, atropine, and scopolamine, which are the drugs that were found in the teacup of Mr. Mendelsohn after forensic examination, are all produced from plants that can be grown in a home garden. This evidence is substantial for us to conclude that Betty Fulford is the person who drugged Mr. Mendelsohn. And this, along with the other facts that I've just presented to you, is enough for us to deduce that Miss Fulford is the true culprit of this crime, not my client. Honorable members of the jury, do not let a man who is truly innocent be wrongfully convicted and punished for this crime. The defense requests that you return a verdict of not guilty for the defendant, Jullian Gallego. Thank you for your time and attention.
The prosecution would like to rebut.
You may rebut.
The defendants speak a big game about speaking the truth, about bringing forth facts, evidence, about putting forth undeniable proof that Betty Fulford is somehow responsible for the murder of Viktor Mendelssohn. Yet all they bring forth is sensationalism and twisting the facts. There is no evidence that Betty Fulford had grown or had access to belladonna, atropine, and scopolamine. It is simply said that, oh, Betty Fulford has a home garden, and these can be grown. The defendants can spend all day, all night, tying together strings, tying together conspiracies to try to deter us, to try to deflect, to try to misguide us from convicting rightfully Jullian Gallego in this case. The hard facts, the hard evidence, the CCTV footage, the false drawer and finding the blue orchid there. The fact that Jullian Gallego was one of few people who knew of the blue orchid and knew of the blue orchid in its entirety are all hard facts, not strings drawn together, not conspiracies, and certainly not as weak as the defendant's evidence that they have presented. Therefore, I hope the jury, on this basis, on these notions, operates on the facts of this case and rightfully convicts and finds guilty Jullian Gallego for the first-degree murder of Viktor Mendelssohn, motivated by his attempt to perpetrate a burglary and a burglary for which he was found. I would like to remind you of the definition that I put forth earlier. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being with malice aforethought. Express malice murders are those in which a person intended to cause death or grievous bodily harm to another. And the definition of murder continues to state that murders of the first degree include those perpetrated by poison, those committed in perpetration of, or the attempt to perpetrate burglary or robbery. I hope that the jury sees the facts, understands the events that occurred on the 9th of December, the tragic events and the tragic demise that was caused by and solely by Jullian Gallego to Viktor Mendelssohn. Thank you. I rest my case.
All right, so with that out of the way, I would like to allot the jury to go into a separate breakout room and to decide the verdict. Thank you.
No, we don't. I think we can just start right away.
Okay. So what do you guys think?
I want to start off with first. Yeah, I want to first start off by looking at Prakhar's points that were made. So he was prosecuting against Jullian Gallego, and he thought that he's the murderer. His main points were that he was one of the only few people who knew about the diamond. The diamond was found in his drawer, in his workspace. His fingerprints were found on the rotary saw. You guys can add on as well.
Also, the things he bought at the shop that contained the hallucinant drug that he didn't know were in the things that he bought.
He was also caught.
He was present at the murder window.
Yeah.
And then he was also behaving uneasy. That was also something.
He was fidgeting.
And then there was an argument that was also mentioned.
The creative argument.
Yeah.
But the motive is there was no motive, right? Or they said that?
I found the motive to be weak, judging from how he obviously Jullian, he adored Viktor. He was his mentor. I don't see a strong motive that he could have had, and I also think that on Prakhar's part, especially, he didn't bring forward a lot of witnesses and evidence, where Sahil, he had plenty of evidence. And I think he also, on top of that, also showed like another he also was
he presented an alternative
against Betty. Yeah.
I mostly have to agree with whatever Teja said, honestly, about the malice aforethought, because I did not see a malice aforethought from the defendant's side. I didn't see a motive that was strong enough to drive him into actually killing a person to him, as proven by the defense, someone who's still lovable, someone who's he's still affectionate about. So I think about the motives, I think I have to agree with you guys completely. And I also felt like their only witness, the lead detective, I felt like his statement was actually very weak at the same time and very hard to trust. And I felt like the one part that I wanted to focus on with the lead detective was that he actually just discharged all the evidences that might lead into proving that, what was the other girl's name?
Betty Fulford.
Betty Fulford.
Right. Betty guilty. Like how he just discharged all those evidences just because the evidences for Jullian Gallego was too overwhelming. I think that was the expression used. I felt like that was very unprofessional. Yeah.
There was no motive presented from the prosecution side for Jullian Gallego. And also, one of the things that they mentioned that would go against Jullian Gallego would be the fact that his fingerprints were present on the murder weapon. But Jullian Gallego did state, however, that they did work together often. And I mean, with having having those many years of experience and working together, I mean, it's inevitable that your fingerprints would be present on tools that you're using.
Yeah, adding on to the motives, they also said that he had no debts, he was financially stable, he could afford school and healthcare as well. So I think the motive part is pretty unclear on
and I want to also say up to a certain point I was not sure of which side to believe. However, one of the points that was brought up was that obviously the Blue Orchid, it was never ever publicized to the public. It was never in the news. However, Betty lied about this as well as other things, saying that she knew about the Blue Orchid through the newspapers, and she also gave an extremely detailed description of how the diamond looked like, which is very interesting because they stated that no one else apart from the immediate circle, like Victor, his client, and Jullian, knew about it. So I find it very interesting that Betty knew how it looked like. And also another thing that Sai was insinuating was that although the time of the murder was around 12 to 4 a.m., there was a fence between their houses, which could not have been caught by the CCTV footage, which could explain why Betty was never shown around those times. So I just wanted to bring that up as well.
Also, not only did she lie about the blue diamond, it was also the phone call that she apparently lied about. And then the fact that she was awake at 6 o'clock when she normally wakes up at 7 o'clock. And then the whole she seemed very unclear about the whole phone call after the murder and all of that as well. About the landline being in the foyer, and but then there was defense against that, saying that her memory could have been affected due to the trauma. That's and also
right.
Also, I mean, motive wise, they did say that they've been close for more than 13 years, which is also a plus from Betty Fulford's side. And then there was no hard evidence that she did grow belladonna or any drug in her garden. However, she did lie before, so there's no proof that she couldn't do it again.
Right. Also, the fact that
she was giving him tea in the morning, so I think that's relevant. And that when the detectives arrived, the teapot wasn't there. I think.
So I think that's it. It pretty much, you can clearly tell that Betty has been tampering with evidence, especially on the crime scene, on the time of crime scene.
Especially with the teapot as well. I think that's one of the main pieces of evidence that we can focus on, because how the teapot wasn't there after she called the police, and how she got up at 6 in the morning just to go change his teapot or something like that. So.
Yeah, because she said that the reason she even went to the place was because she saw that the teapot was not full. So she went, and Sao mentioned that it wasn't a justified reason for like forced entry or something like that. And after the detectives arrived, the teapot was gone, and she was the only one that actually saw the teapot during that time, and then it was gone after the detectives came.
Yeah. And even just in terms of like continuity, I think that it just favored a lot more on Saul's side, especially considering that the lead detective was very unclear with his facts. He was switching up a lot of what he said, even compared to like the affidavit before. And it was also found that Betty has lied several times, which would obviously further Sahil's
But then also her fingerprints were not found on the murder weapon, were they?
That is true. Yeah, they were not.
But then I was also thinking that they did mention that the drug ingested could cause like severe hallucinations, which could, and I mean, if what's his name? If Mendelsohn did work with diamonds and cutting diamonds, he would most likely have a saw around the house, which could have been used on himself during the hallucinations. But then again, there's no evidence that Betty Fulford, she did not use the murder weapon, that's for sure. And the only two fingerprints there were Mendelsohn's and Gallego's.
Also, one doubt I have. So Betty said that she didn't actually grow the drug, right, in the garden.
She did not know. I believe it was just said like it was an environment where they could be grown in.
But she didn't grow them her like self, right?
Yeah, there were no Belladura plants found in her garden.
It wasn't found?
No, yeah, that's what they mentioned.
Okay.
I personally felt like I tried driving back to like the main essence of this whole case. The prosecution, like, of course, we all know the truth. The burden is on the prosecution for this trial is to prove that the defendant, I forgot his name. The Jullian Gallego, that he's guilty, and with for malice after forethought, he killed our I don't like, I'm not good with names. Anyway, so they need to prove that they've killed, so he's killed them, right? And I feel like whatever Betty Fulford says, like whatever, no matter how suspicious she is, I still don't think like that's like the essence of this case. Rather, them trying to protect Betty Fulford, yes, it could be done, but I don't think they did a really good job on the other hand to prove that the defendant is actually guilty. And more of it was, I felt like their whole arguments were sort of distorted in a way, and they were not straightforward into proving what should actually have been proven.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In this case. Yeah. So I feel like in those areas also, I saw a bit of faultiness. Yeah.
But then again, looking at it from Betty Fulford's perspective, if she did indeed put the hallucinogen in the tea, she wouldn't have expected Mendelsohn to end up harming himself, especially with like a saw. So that could not be guaranteed, in which case if she did take the diamonds, he would have known later, like if he was alive. Yeah. But if you look at it from the perspective of Jullian Gallego, his fingerprints were found, and that too, but it was 12 hours ago. So I mean,
yeah, and
to look into that.
This is something I also was observing, but like throughout the whole time, I don't think there was a motive given for why Betty would have done this, which probably might have been as a result of poor detective work by the lead detective. And I think like if there was more investigation into Betty, then that would have been clearer. But I think that the fact that she has lied so many times in this case, should further that.
And even the detective didn't look into it, which was kind of suspicious, with that much experience.
Right.
Yeah, true.
So, does anyone else have anything else to say? So, are we all decided that Jullian Gallego is innocent?
Innocent.
Yes.
All right.
The evidence would favor Jullian Gallego over.
then I think we're ready to.
Is everyone
then I
agreeing
think
with
we're-
that?
Wait, could you
Yeah, I think-
repeat what you just said? My internet cut out.
Yeah, I said that is everyone here in favor of saying that Jullian Gallego is innocent?
Yeah.
Are we sure about that though?
I-
Because there was quite a bit of evidence against him.
That is true, but then I just think that even just in terms of credibility, because Betty was found lying multiple times.
That is true.
In this case, and also I think that Sile's witnesses, they were a lot more thought out. The reasoning were also a lot more concrete, and there was more evidence behind it.
Yes, and also the fact that Jullian didn't have any particular motive for doing it.
Yeah.
But
The
then
motive
what
is like
motive?
the, I
But
think,
then again, they didn't really speak about Betty's financial situation, so we wouldn't really know.
yeah, but like the motive for Jullian Gallego was like probably the most convincing part for me, because you know, he was a mentor and everything, and he was also financially stable. Like he credits a lot of his success and his I think passion for cutting diamonds and everything to Mendelsohn. So I think it would be really unclear to why he would kill him in the first place.
But then again, having that desk for so long, how would he not know that there's a false juror present?
True. I think
because.
But then again, I remember them saying that when the diamond was discovered in the false drawer, it was confirmed by the policeman that Jullian was very, very surprised to see this.
But I mean, there are other instances where he was behaving uneasy and stuff like that. So how can we prove that?
I feel like although there were those instances, I don't think they were properly enforced by the prosecution. I mean, they were brought up, but I don't think the prosecution did a good enough job to actually making them sound reliable. And
that is true. I feel like the
thoughts.
prosecution was weaker than the defense.
Right. So, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so is everyone unanimous on the decision that Jullian is guilty?
Yeah.
Sorry, not guilty, innocent.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then I think we're ready to say a verdict. So we have decided upon our verdict, and we find the defendant Jullian Gallego innocent and revoke the charge of murder through maleficent use against the party.
And well, that is the verdict. I will now say that court is adjourned.